Hello guys, I hope you're doing well. This is Lee and Giangan, and I would like to share with you an essay I have written in 2014, originally intended for the cadets of the Philippine Military Academy. The title of the essay is Logic of Peace, and I would like to divide this sharing in two sections. So please wait for the second part of this sharing. The logic of peace. It is not unreasonable that military men should detest war and love peace. It is not for lack of courage on their part, but because they know so well how armed conflict destroys not only material but also moral goods that military men should desire peace. Armed conflict damages not only the physical infrastructure of a country, such as its transportation systems and power supplies, among other things, but also, and more unfortunately, the moral infrastructure of all its citizens, which is their search for happiness. And so, while only soldiers engage in battles, a whole nation is engaged in war. For this reason, every citizen should lend his hand to the urgent human task of peace building. The attainment, maintenance, and promotion of peace, therefore, is everyone's moral responsibility, and it is also through fundamentally moral means that genuine and lasting peace is thus attained, maintained, and promoted. This essay on peace and development and the essential moral requirement of honor and virtue for their attainment aims to foster the idea that peace in the world can only be had if there is peace in the soul. This is the logic of peace. In a broad outline, this essay approaches peace from an organic point of view, from a perspective that considers other elements in human life that are relevant to the talk on peace. First of all, what is peace? The compendium of the social doctrine of the Church is very instructive in this matter. It states, peace is not merely the absence of war, nor can it be reduced solely to the maintenance of a balance of power between enemies. Rather, it is founded on a correct understanding of the human person and requires the establishment of an order based on justice and charity. First, peace is not merely the absence of war. No doubt, peace is positive, concrete, and active. It is founded on everyone's heart and mind. It cannot be denied that the human element is central in war. If it is in human wills that where war is rooted, then it is also in human wills where peace is rooted. If wars are to be won, or if peace in the land be promoted, the fundamental weapon, then, should be the goodwill of man and peace in his soul. Wars are fundamentally fought, and peace ultimately won deep within the soul. If we would fail the moral struggle within, then the political and military struggle without will break out. The external state of the world mirrors the internal state of our souls. The internal state of souls, therefore, is where one can find that active, concrete, and primary realization of peace. Second, peace cannot be reduced solely to the maintenance of a balance of power between enemies. While it is true that the balance of power has its immediate practical effect, that is, a relative absence of actual armed engagements, it is rather unstable and tempts conflicting parties to amass weapons in a race towards military superiority. This arms race would threaten the proportionate allocation of public goods, and finally would threaten the common good of the whole nation or of nations. We constantly hear echoed in our times the words of Aegis of the 4th century AD. He said, "Let him who desires peace prepare for war." Now, as it is the right of the state to defend itself, so therefore it is legitimate to enable itself for this defense. The defense posture, however, that should be created requires that it be military credible, and military credibility of one's own defense is relative to other nations' military capabilities. Hence, the tension between promoting a nation's common good, which should take into account a proportionate budget allocation, and defending it from aggressors, which should in turn take into account the potential or actual enemy's military capability. Taken from the point of view not only at the national but also at the international level, arms race can, of course, be halted by international agreements so that military credibility no longer requires maximum military might. However, even in this setup, there will still be tension between the promotion of the common good and its defense from aggressors. Only when aggression in the heart of man, fallen man, has already been obliterated, that perfect external peace can truly be possessed. A perfect external peace that requires no less than a new heaven and a new earth. Until then, men of goodwill must work tirelessly for an external peace that can be reasonably attained here on earth, while placing their entire hope for perfect external peace that can only be attained beyond this world. With these considerations in mind, it seems to me reasonable to say that the halting of any arms race should not lead to total abolition of the military, especially because of the unconventional form of post-modern warfare. As the late President of the Philippines, Manuel L. Quezon, has once said, that defenselessness invites aggression. In the meantime, men of goodwill would have to engage in war as a last resort, worthy of a just war, even as they must do so with sorrow, for the means to peace employed seems not to be the better and the only means. In other words, the lastness of the resort can always be questioned. For this reason, the graver and more necessary moral responsibility that can result to a more stable and happier states of affairs lies not in this precarious and ironical prevention of armed engagements in a balance of power, and not even in international agreements trying to regulate some nations' military growth, but in proactively removing every condition that makes war possible. That is why the graver moral responsibility is peace building, and peace building ultimately means making friends out of our enemies. Aegis was correct, but only partly. This leads us to our third point. Peace is founded on a correct understanding of the human person. The building of true peace, whose subject and object is a person, absolutely requires an integralist and universalist view of the human person, meaning a view that embraces all men and all aspects of man. When a society begins to consider certain portions of humanity or of the human person himself as less worthy of respect than the others, then that society is courting war. If it cannot respect the inviolable humanity of the other, then it attracts the same disrespect from others, creating a culture of disrespect and insensitivity. When every society encourages, for example, a contraceptive an abortive mentality that considers human life as a relative value to be governed by the value of prosperity considered as an absolute, then every society will eventually be contracepting and aborting each other for the sake of their own respective prosperities, which is what war really is. War is social contraception and abortion. War is the product of dehumanization, and as contraceptions and abortions are, even as it can also be the cause of dehumanization. Fourth point, peace requires the establishment of an order based on justice and charity. In other words, another name for peace is development, since true development is built upon justice and charity. If the term peace may be more formal or more abstract and detached, as it were, the term development should allow us to visualize how external peace, peace in society, is concretely realized. By bringing together the two concepts as mutually implying each other, one can say now that helping together in avoiding war means helping together in promoting development. Furthermore, a nation's true development should then also be based on a correct view of the human person, and must also then be integral and universal. This implies three things. One, that all of us need to contribute our share towards the attainment of this development. Two, that the benefits of development itself should be shared with all, regardless of age, gender, or status. Three, that in order for development to be genuine, the spiritual aspect of man, which opens him towards transcendence, should always be respected and promoted. That no so-called development should force someone to violate his conscience, for example. These three implications are applications of the basic principles set forth by Maritain in his book, The Person and the Common Good. On the one hand, because man is an individual, a part of the whole society, it is his duty to work for the common good of society. On the other hand, because he is a person, a being existing for its own sake, this common good that he is working for must redound to the good of his own person also, as it is of other persons. And finally, by virtue of being a person whose whole dimension cannot be encompassed by life in human society, man must look up towards transcendence, towards a relationship with God, towards a divine society, a relationship, the freedom of which must be recognized, not granted but recognized by society as to something beyond its legitimate scope. This is the basic outline of peace and development that can be envisioned for all peoples. But however great one's intent and efforts for this broad moral vision, one cannot limit its attainment to a reductively political means, for there is some fundamentally moral ingredient that must be present in our endeavors towards such a vision, whether our endeavors are small or big. That is why we have to go back to what was said earlier, that peace and development requires an essentially moral means, such as honor and virtue, for their attainment. The internal logic of peace leads us to consider honor and virtue as having an essential connection with both the nature and attainment of peace and development. Thank you for listening. Please see the second part of this essay. Again, thank you.